this is Deboki, and today I wanted to talk about something a little different from what I usually talk about. I want to talk about TV. In particular, I want to talk about Korean drama. I really love Korean dramas because they're contained, they're romantic, they're fun, but I was kind of on a long hiatus from them for really no good reason, and I recently watched one that I really loved, and I just wanted to review it, and I wanted to talk about why I think it's especially great for people who are on BookTube, who love books, who love reading, who love stories. I'll probably talk more about TV stuff in the future. I don't really know how I'll do this, but whatever. Today I'm going to talk about W. Before I start, I want to say that I will attempt to say things vaguely correctly, but I am like 1000% certain that my version of saying these Korean names will be like super anglicized, so I apologize for that in advance. So, W is about Kang Chul, who is a rich CEO whose family was all murdered, and he was basically kind of accused of this murder, but even though he was not responsible, and this past has inspired him to start his own investigation TV series. Kang Chul does not know is that he is actually the main character of W, a best-selling Korean graphic novel. Oh Yeon-ju, a doctor who also happens to be the daughter of W's author, magically gets drawn into the world of W and ends up saving Kang Chul's life several times with her knowledge of medicine as well as what's planned for him in the story. Kang Chul is obviously like, who the fuck is this girl? And she's obviously like, how do you tell someone that their life is entirely fiction? And then they obviously fall in love, but everything is super complicated because one of them's a fictional character. This show had a lot of hype around it. I had heard really good things in reviews, and it absolutely lived up to the hype for me. Like so many great popular Korean dramas, it has great romance, fun characters, and plenty of twists and turns. What I particularly loved about this show from the start is the meta-ness. Obviously the show is fiction, but Kang Chul's life is a fiction within that fiction. So there are constantly questions for him about why his life is so full of twists and turns and tragedy that are really only answered by the fact that his whole life is dictated by narrative forces that real people don't have to deal with. This means that there's a lot of discussion throughout the show about character development, romance, plotting, and pacing, both in the real world as people discuss what they've just read in the latest issue of W, but more importantly from Kang Chul's perspective as he starts to realize how these literary ideas are shaping his life. At some points he even starts to try and exploit some of these ideas to create certain outcomes in his own world, which is even more fascinating to watch because you're basically watching a story get put together in real time. In some ways, I think the show is about what it would be like for someone who actually lives the life that TV shows and books and movies illustrate. At other times it even feels like an apology letter from the writers of the show for creating vivid characters who have terrible things done to them. At one point, Kang Chul realizes that his traumatic past is really just more cheap backstory to give his character motivation, and it felt like such a real call out to these stories we've read that are similarly thin in these aspects. And that tension carries through his confrontation with his creator, a scene that really had me on my edge. There are similar callouts to other familiar tropes, like the loyal female best friend who's meant to be the woman in front of his eyes all along, and along with these things are kind of some hints as to why these tropes can be unfulfilling if you think of them too long. Another thing that I enjoyed is that for a good portion of the show, the heroine actually has more agency than the hero because she actually kind of knows what's going on. He doesn't have any clue that he's a fictional character for a good portion of it. He just basically keeps on almost dying, and this strange woman keeps coming in and saving him. While he does get more agency over the course of the show, it never comes at the expense of Oh Yeon-ju's. She's incredibly competent and capable, and while she has moments of being in distress and needing rescue, the show has built up the events well so that it never feels cheap or denigrating to her character. A common issue that I've had with Korean dramas is that sort of in the last quarter they can sometimes get a bit convoluted as they wrap up their plot lines, especially as they're trying to weave together like vast conspiracies like many of these shows do. The plots can sometimes get a bit too twisted until nothing makes sense anymore, and sometimes the pacing gets off. I thought that the show was paced well, and it definitely got stressful in the second half. I think it felt like it could have ended at least 5 times because there was so much happening, but it never got too off the rails. It also felt strangely appropriate for a story about stories to feel like it could have ended several times because it kind of feels like a commentary on how hard it is to end something. Still, I did feel like the show did border on a bit too convoluted with its explanations of how characters can switch from the real world to the world of the graphic novel. And as that got expanded to affect the plot more and more, I sort of lost track of what was happening. This really only affected my enjoyment of like maybe the last few episodes, but it was also easy enough to like ignore and kind of focus on the stakes that I was actually interested in, and just sort of kind of block out the confusing explanations and just take things for granted. So I wanted to start off with this show for my TV whatever reviews, because I think this show is perfect for people on BookTube. If you love dissecting stories and thinking about how narrative choices affect our understanding of a book, this is seriously the perfect show for you. I'm not saying that you should go in expecting like a full-on essay about how to write a story, but it does get you thinking about why we expect or don't expect certain things to happen in stories. There's also this sort of meta commentary on fandom as well, which I think for a lot of us, like, if you're on BookTube, you've probably been either in a fandom or tangentially aware of a fandom, so it's kind of fun in that like sort of familiar way. If you have watched Korean dramas before, the lead actor for the guy playing Kang Chul is also the lead from Pinocchio, so if you like that show, that's another reason to watch. If you are new to K-dramas, I think it's also a really good one to start off with, partly because it's on Hulu, so it's easy to access if you have Hulu, but it also has these ideas that I think will be familiar no matter what genre of books or TV or shows or movies you're most familiar with. Thank you for watching. If you are a fan of K-dramas, let me know what you're watching now. I am kind of in the middle of Legend of the Blue Sea, which I'm enjoying because it's my favorite lead actress and my favorite lead actor in the show together, so that's good. And yeah, bye.